Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is another edition and probably one of the most powerful editions of the Envision Speaker Series, only because I have four fantastic women on the call today who left on their own or as a group could actually change the world because of everything that they do, everything that they've been through, and the stories that they're about to tell today. And so welcome all of you to the call. And so I so appreciate you being here with me today. And of course,
Thank you, Keith.
now you're all
Thanks.
quiet. The good thing is it's
Thank
being
you, Keith.
recorded.
Can we raise our hand? Thank you.
Totally good. And so I want to introduce each of you. So I have Eileen, Diane, Amanda, and Malka. Now, all of you have conversations with me in the past on either this type of conversation, the Envision Speaker Series, or one of my other podcasts, the Question Guy podcast or Coach's Corner. So I do welcome you specifically to the Envision Speaker Series. And the four of you are going to bring so much value to this conversation. But before we begin, clockwise, according to my perspective, so starting with Eileen here in the corner, introduce yourself, please. Give our audience some understanding of what brings you, what you want to take out of this conversation and what you want to give to the conversation. What do you want to see as a result of our call today? Eileen?
Thank you, Keith. Looking forward to this. Yes, I'm Eileen Bild. I'm CEO of Ordinary to Extraordinary Life. And my background begins with a master's in transpersonal psychology through my own experience from healing from a health crisis to who I am today. I realized that life is a series of conversations, transformations, and stories that we tell ourselves and how we relate to the world. And so, what I'm excited about today is to help people understand that it's okay to change and that change is part of life. Change is a constant. And through that change, there's what I call the three C's: confidence, courage, and clarity. And when those are powerful, you're empowered. And through that empowerment, your life can become extraordinary, part of that ordinary to extraordinary. So, what I'd like to see the audience today, so listen to all four of us. We come from the same foundation, I think, but just we apply things in our own unique way. And to take the information that we share about how we've become who we are today and apply the skills, the tools, whatever we share to your life so that you can become a better version of yourself. Your life can become happier, more joyful, and perspective. Your story shifts and changes in a way that your life becomes brighter and more vibrant, and you feel alive, and you're living life versus life, pulling you along. And that's what I hope people will achieve from today's conversation.
And at this point, if
Beautiful.
that's all that's said, I think we're on target. And so I think we're great. So this is going to be a transformational conversation. Diane, welcome to the call. What
Thank
brings
you,
you
Keith.
here? Absolutely. What brings you here and what do you want to get out of it?
So, coming to you from Whidbey Island, Washington, I'm a podcaster, and my podcast is Stories from Women Who Walk. I'm also the founder of Quarter Moon Story Arts. So, I'm up here on Whidbey Island, Washington, where the November to May Rain Festival seems to want to continue. As the founder of Quarter Moon Story Arts, I am at heart a storyteller. And as I look back over the last 3 decades of my life, story has shown up, whether it's been in nursing or business or law or education, it's always been there. And I see that there are 3 values that underpin, or the river that runs under my work. It's adventure and justice and self-expression. And so one of the ideas that I'm hoping we'll get across today is that we have specific values or traits or qualities that run like a river under our lives. And those give expression to our stories, especially when we are able to look back and pinpoint them and say, wow, I didn't know I had that. So my job here, I think, is to help us see the stories that are within women and guide them to finding a use for those stories in the spirit of who they are and in their own words. What I would like to come away with myself and what I would like our listeners to come away with is a bit of a quote from C.S. Lewis. I'm going to have this carved on my ashes because I won't have a headstone. But he says, "What? You too? I thought I was the only one." And story is our human connected experience. We are not alone. We are never the only one. And my guess is that by listening to the five of us, you'll be saying, "What? You too? I thought I was the only one." So thank you.
You're welcome. I think we all need to put that somewhere in our journals today. And so that's kind of a good starting point to the conversation. Amanda, good morning. How are you? What brings you to the call today?
Well, I'm excited to have been invited to this space with these master storytellers. I have been working with individuals, mostly women, although there are a few brave men who have um, taken the journey with me of writing their stories, putting their own narratives into books. And sometimes, most of the time, this is nonfiction. They're trying to put a really important message or framework into the world and need to tell their story, their big why, to communicate it. And so quickly found out that that was what was keeping most people from actually finishing their content. And so I had to figure out how to help people move through their stories because I thought I was just helping them with content. That was my jam. And so over the years, I've been figuring out that not only is it possible for the writing process and the community witnessing to help people see their stories more clearly and rewrite their stories more powerfully and really actually heal some of those old wounds, but story itself is a really powerful tool. So that's what I hope to um, add to today's conversation is not just story as a means of connection, but story as a tool for unearthing, for doing that deep dive dig into our stories so that we can rewrite it powerfully.
That was beautiful. And so I thank you for being part of this conversation and for adding to it. And so finally, Malka, man, what do you want to get out of it today? This is going to be awesome.
It is already awesome. Thank you so much for having me again. I'm less of a storyteller than a story user. The story is never the goal in my work. The story is a tool. My story helped me because when I was younger, a younger woman, my story was, I want to grow up and have a happy family. And I had a story about what that looked like. And then when I did actually marry my husband and start having children, we had a family, but it wasn't always a happy family. Sometimes there was like screaming and bickering and all kinds of things. And I would occasionally find myself going, this wasn't what I had in mind. Like, is it always going to be like this? Is there anything I can do to fix it? And I became, let's just say, mildly obsessed with figuring out what works and what doesn't, and how do you stop doing what's not working, or why do you keep doing what's not working, and how do you ever learn to do anything different? And it turns out that discovering stories that I have in my head, not just about myself, but about the other people in my family, or about who I am in the world, all kinds of stories, are a powerful tool when I can get them out of my mind and out there in front of another person or on the page of a journal or speak them in a workshop with other women. Then I suddenly see it for what it is. It's a story. It might be a meaningful story, an important story, a powerful story, but it's not facts. It's a story. And so then, as some other people have mentioned here, I can't remember exactly who said what, it means that I can edit it. It means that I can change it. It means I'm not as compelled or as stuck in the story as I thought it was once I know it's a story, naming it as a story and looking at the people in the story as characters or talking about a plot opens up my mind to new possibilities in the story. And I am able to shift myself from feeling stuck, maybe even feeling put upon, or maybe even sort of a victim, to agency, right? Which is a very a word that we all really like here, right? It means I'm not just stuck in it. I can do something about it. In addition to being a character in the story, I'm actually the author of this story. And I can decide what the next line, paragraph, chapter, episode are going to look like. I can do that. I have that power. And then when women work with me, I can help them think about where they want to take their story and what they have to do that. So I just find that to be really exciting because it enables women to actually live the family lives that they want to have. I work with women who are married and who are moms, specifically on family relationships, on relationship issues. So the story is just the tool. The goal is always, what kind of relationship is it that I wanted to have? Where did it go off the rails? And how can I take it to where I want it to go? And story is one of the most important tools in doing that.
Malka, thank you. And so with all that, I guess at this point, the watching and listening audience recognizes that there's a theme here, and we are going to talk about the power of story. And so we recognized already that each of the four of you kind of think of story in a very unique way. It's a tool, it's a structure, it's a narrative. And even Amanda is going to talk about the idea that it's also medicinal. It's a type of medicine that we use to kind of structure, heal, and create this pathway through life that allows us to restructure it. And so with that, let's be really clear, and I know you've just given your backgrounds on how we want to talk about stories specifically. 2 or 3 minutes from each of you, kind of hone in on really what is the power of story. And Diane, I'm going to start with you only because that's your podcast. That's the structure of your podcast. And then from there, I might do a zigzag or just the rest of you kind of jump in when Diane gives you the space to do so. Diane, what is the power of story?
Thank you, Keith. Yes, Stories from Women Who Walk is about the healing power of story. I say that I'm not a therapist, but story is therapeutic. And Quarter Moon Story Arts was designed specifically with the idea that a quarter moon lights up our road just a little bit when we need that. And the lighthouse that stands there beckons us to safe harbor. It says, this is a place where you belong. This is a place that is safe. This is the place for you to discover, become aware of your story. So I would say that story is, in my world, a way to resurrect our humanity so that we can engage and connect with others and transform the lives of those we serve. To me, story is organic. It is alive. It is not just a static tool that you use in the corporate world to market or brand or sell. It's a living thing. We are all living stories. It may not seem like it at the time. It might sometimes feel like we are just living catastrophes, but a story is about hardship, really. It is about how people face their hardships, and out of the hardships come a sense of resilience, encouragement, growth. And when we become aware of our stories, when we take the time to unearth or discover our who, not our why, our who, then we are in a better place to take some action on our story and then to share that story. And when we tell our stories, when we share them, when we give ourselves permission to become vulnerable, to become wounded, to become authentic, that is when other people learn that they're not alone. And that is where we begin our human connection experience.
Who wants to jump in? So this is, what is the power? You don't have to raise your hand. You go ahead and jump in.
Go ahead, Malka.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I want to address what Diane said so beautifully about awareness. When a woman comes to me, she doesn't know she has a story. A woman comes with a complaint. My husband is late. He doesn't care about me. My husband didn't buy me a present for my birthday. He doesn't love me anymore. My husband didn't pick up the kids on time. He's not a caring father. You know, all kinds of complaints. She doesn't think that's a story. She thinks that's the truth. That's the God honest, objective truth as she sees it. By helping her to become aware of the fact that there's two parts to what she's telling me. He was late, that could be, but does that necessarily mean what she thinks it means? Does he think that's what it means? No, helping her to open that up a bit, right? What Brene Brown so beautifully calls the story I'm telling myself is. Helping her to become aware of the bridge that she made so automatically between what actually happened and what it must mean is very powerful, because then she becomes aware of the fact that, well, maybe it means something different. As long as she knows for sure that this experience must necessarily equal, you know, he doesn't love me, what can she do about it? But the second she calls it a story, well, when that happened, this is what I felt, but maybe it could mean something else. All of a sudden, the whole world, a whole new world of opportunities is open to her. And in terms of what Diane also said so beautifully about the opportunity that story offers us for connecting with another person's humanity, that's the next thing that happens in the process of helping a woman uncover her story, is she hears her story in her voice, and then she can ask herself, oh, the other person that's in the story, where is his voice? What is his story in the situation? And then she's seeing the other person that's in the story. Before, she wasn't seeing another person. She was totally consumed by her pain and her experience. And by reframing her complaint or her pain or her experience as a story, it brings the other character in the story much more to life. It makes the other person much more of a full human being and someone who I can engage with and say, oh, this is how I felt. How do you feel? Even if the other person is not in the conversation, it enables her to suddenly see the other person in the story as much more fully human. And that really is an incredible opportunity for her to then write a much more human and a much more connected and a less self-centered next part of the story.
Malka, did you use the term automagically?
I
Did I
did.
hear that?
You
May
did.
I use that?
Yes, you may. That is my
I
gift to
love
you.
that so much.
I'm
love
so
it
glad.
much.
Please take it as a gift.
Well, that fair
sorcery
game,
of
it's everybody else's
stories.
gift too, right?
What?
Well, fair game. Everybody who listens to this show, it's
Everybody, it's a free gift automatically. And I have a couple of other word gifts, like if there's time, that I'll add at the end.
Woo!
That would be great.
Eileen, Amanda, you want to add
yes.
with the power of story?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to add as far as what Diane and Malka have said, I'm going to add this piece to what they so beautifully have expressed. One thing that I have found as a female and as a woman is that we process information differently than men. Men like things short, sweet, to the point. Women, we need to tell stories. It's not a choice. We have to be able to express ourselves. And in my case, I like to speak it out loud because it helps me just automatically process whatever my emotions and my feelings are, so that I get those pings along the way to show me what's real and what's imaginary in my mind. So if I'm given the opportunity in this space to speak out loud, even if it takes me 15 minutes, where it might take someone a minute, um, I need that space. I need that time. And I think women are not given that enough to be able to process their emotions, their feelings that's behind it. And the validation of it is very key for the person listening for them. I like to say listen for people, not to them. And if people can learn the art of communication by listening for, understanding when they're validating versus invalidating, and giving females, specifically females, the opportunity to say what she needs to say and wants to say, so she can get it out and get it off her chest. And I think that's why there's as Malka said, heated conversations and conflict and contrast, because we don't feel validated when we're trying to say what we want to say. And as Diane said, it's part of building that confidence, courage, and clarity, my 3 C's. And I believe Diane used the word courage out of my 3 C's. And it takes a lot of courage to speak your own voice, especially as a female, because we're either seen as bitchy or emotional or whatever we're labeled. But the truth is, we just want to tell our story. We just want to express and be able to say what's within us and not have to hold that in and feel like we can't speak. So I think it's really important as females to feel comfortable and to feel that other people are valuing what you're sharing without judgment, right? And just giving us the space to talk and be able to share that story. But we also have to be open to hearing what the other person has to say of their perspective. So then, as Malka said, understanding our story may not be the full reality, but to us, it is our reality. And so it's kind of that dance and going back and forth in that communication to where you're meeting in the middle with the other person or people, and there's a better understanding of where the speaker's coming from, where the person that the speaker's speaking to, and everybody can leave feeling good because there's a better understanding of what just happened through the story.
I love it.
So that's what I wanted to share.
I love this idea of telling our stories and having space to share them. But my journey with stories started when I could not articulate how I was feeling. I was so caught in a character role with crazy plot lines and twists that I didn't even know. I truly was living like in a crime drama, and nobody told me until I was 35. But in my early 20s, I found a story on screen that gave me the ability to say, that's how I'm feeling. I feel the weight of Frodo trying to carry this impossibly small, but such a heavy load to a distant place. I'm not sure. And honestly, I didn't have friends to be like on the journey with me. I had one. And with that one friend and that one story, I started to use story as a language to help me figure out what the heck was going on inside of me. Why do I resonate with this character? I would much rather be the wizard with the staff who can make stuff happen. But I'm like the little hobbit who is so weighed down, and has no business going up to this mountain trying to do what he's been asked to do. But that's how I felt in my life. And so story became this language for us to talk about things that were so beneath the surface we couldn't even know what they were. But it started to give us this ability to articulate emotions, to figure out what were the root causes, what were the storylines that were driving these feelings. And I feel like that's one of the key parts of storytelling, is that we give people the opportunity. When we say, you know, I was in the middle of a crime drama and I didn't know it, right? People are like leaning in thinking, I feel like I might be too, but I'm not sure who the villain is. Right? Like there's some mystery here. And so that's, for me, that's the real power of story. I've used it with my son on the couch for 20 years, sitting down and hammering out, plot lines and motivations and predictions. And what are these, where did this person really go wrong? Why do you think they're doing these things? Because I don't think our culture has done a good enough job with women, and very certainly men, giving us that literacy, that social emotional literacy, to say, this is how I'm feeling and I need help sorting it out. So I think story gives us that opportunity.
Wow, can I just take a second to really appreciate that, and to appreciate the role that stories have had in my life as well. And here I don't mean my personal stories, but great stories written by other people where I have been able to see myself in the story and say, oh God, if she could do that, maybe I can do it too.
Yeah.
Or like you said, oh gosh, that's how I feel. Because like, I really get her, and
You know how many times I threw Jane Eyre? I just rocket launched that against the fireplace in my house half a dozen times. I don't know why there was nobody in my life who looked at this tattered mess of a book and said, what's happening while you're reading this? What's
Totally.
going on for you? What is this? I didn't have anyone to say. The ideas, sure, had master facilitators pushing me on the ideas and the themes and what does it mean in the historical context. But I was just like, I need someone to help me sort
Wow.
this
On the
out.
one hand, I want to say like, wow, what a shame. On the other hand, look what you did with it. Like you took the vacuum and you decided to fill it with your own thing, which is gorgeous and brave. And also, I love the way you've developed the ability to ask open questions. Why do you think you're not offering him answers? You're not cutting to the end of the chase. You're not telling him how the story ends up. You're asking him to imagine his way into somebody else's story, and whose story isn't done yet. And that's brilliant.
And a lot of times it was pure curiosity, because I was a tangled mess watching this theme play out, trying not to let my story impact his. So what do you think is happening with friendship? And he'd be like, what's happening with you? I'd be like, I have some friendship stories that this is like knocking on the doors, making me feel kind of like angry. And that's me. What do you think is happening? And he could help me sort out my truth by seeing something beautiful a little bit more clearly, not through this lens of 20 years of crime happening in the back, betrayals, and this sort of thing.
There's a real difference between seeing that your stories could be connected or related and feeling that one is imposing their story on the other. Those aren't the same. So you didn't impose, but you were willing to share and discuss and reflect and let each other be part of each other's story, which is beautiful.
And to this day, as my partner, my business partner, he will say, so this is something that's probably going to hit that little friendship thing you got going on.
All right.
So
right?
I do want to get us back on track. And so that was a good. And I was about to say, earlier is that, Diane, you have taught me the power of metaphor in our conversations, and Amanda brought in a really clear metaphor as she saw herself in this character in The Lord of the Rings, Frodo, with a small piece that it was a massive burden. And so I wouldn't mind, but this is too much to impose, to bring the four of you back and let's talk about how metaphor works in your own stories. But for this conversation, we need to be really clear that we do want to take our audience, now that we've identified what the power of story is, the fact that we have agency to change it, we really want to take the rest of the time together to help empower our audience. We want to get to a target. We want to get them through something challenging in their own life. How do we do that? How does story, how does our own personal narrative give us permission? And I heard that word used maybe once or more so far, to give us clarity, but more importantly, give us permission to change. Because we want to do that. We want to be able to say, ooh, I have permission to make changes in my own story. Because we all go through our own stories. And so our stories are basically accumulation of everything that we've been through, our past. And so our past catches up with our present. But the four of you are telling me, I don't have to live in the past. The four of you are telling me is I can create a future. So let's kind of move into that direction. How do we use our own story to start recreating or designing a future that we want to move into?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start because I have thoughts going in my head. I don't want to lose them. I want to say core thinking and core thinking blueprint is my foundation. Nothing starts until we have a thought. So we can sit here in silence and we may still have thinking, but if you're in true silence, nothing's moving, nothing's happening. So it's our thoughts that are very powerful. And then you go into what's your belief system, what's your belief about XYZ. And if you repeat a belief or a thought over and over again, it becomes a belief. So the story is your belief of what's real. But if it's not giving you a empowering experience, then there's something in that thought and belief that is out of balance or incorrect in allowing you to have and enabling you to have a powerful, empowering, vital, and loving, joyful experience. So if anyone's going to take what we have all shared today and do an action, it would be to look at what is your core belief system and does it give you the opportunity to improve upon, to inspire yourself and or others, or does it create drama and chaos and disconnect? And you can identify which, because it's going to be either or. And if there's a disconnect or uneasy feeling, women especially, we're very intuitive. And if you learn to pay attention to how your body feels when you have a thought or you say something, you can stop yourself and redefine what you're saying. So I'm also all about take a word, if it's a negative word or has a weight to that word, replace it with something that's lighter and a better, will leave you feeling good and the other person feeling good. Now, a lot of people might say, well, why do I have to be the one to change? Well, it's got to start somewhere. And if the other person is bringing you the same thing over and over again, it's our responsibility as the individual to change something. And just a simple word change can have a very powerful cause and effect. And so there's something called the map of consciousness. You can use that as a gauge. Anything above neutral are the more positive, what we call energy form words. And if you look at the lower portion of that map of consciousness, that's what weighs us down: anger, stress, fear. So you want to move yourself up that map of consciousness into the more vibrant words, and shift your vocabulary, shift your thinking, shift your belief system, and automatically, automagically, I gotta start using that word. Your life changes without you thinking I have to change. It's just an automatic process. And that's one avenue of coming into that autonomy of the responsibility for who you are in the world and how you show up.
Keith, I'd like to mention something that you told me and build on what Eileen has just been sharing with us. And there was something that I heard you say to me, and I've not forgotten, that each time I speak, I keep repeating the same thing, that I want to help women be seen, heard, understood, and listened to. And I wasn't aware that it had become a mantra until you pointed it out. And it's true. That's exactly the work that I do as Quarter Moon, helping women be seen, heard, understood, and listened to. And as we were talking earlier, that is a challenge that faces women worldwide, this sense of invisibility. But that work didn't come overnight from a place of, oh, I think this is what I'm going to do with my life now that I've done these other things. No, there was a point in my life when I was being cheeky with the universe and said, I'd like something a little bit different here. And within the space of 9 months, I did get different. I lost my mom to a misdiagnosis of lymphoma. I lost my law firm position when 2 firms merged and there wasn't enough room for the associates to come along. And I lost my marriage to my husband's year-long infidelities. And so in the space of 9 months, I went from being what I thought was pretty okay, fat, dumb, and happy, to I wasn't. And the bed was my best friend. And my life was so dry and so broken. It's almost as if it didn't exist anymore. And in the space of that, a friend of a friend called and said, I need a keynoter to come and speak to a group of women. Like, yeah, well, you got to dial somebody else up because that ain't me. And she said, well, at least let's meet for lunch. And because I'm Polish, food sounds really good. And I thought, what the heck? I'll meet her for lunch. Well, apparently she knew the story because she was a friend of a friend. And she didn't bring it up. She kept talking about this keynote and why she thought I was important. And we had our lunch. And at the end of it, I said, thanks very much. It's been a great meal, but I ain't going where you want me to go. And she leaned across the table and she looked me in the eye. And now it's getting serious. When people do that, she looked me in the eye and she said, I know where you are. You are in the valley of death. And the good book says that we are supposed to walk through the valley of death. The book says nothing about building a brick house and planting a garden and putting up a little picket fence. And so starting now, you are walking through the valley of death. And I'm going to be waiting for you on the other side. And that was the beginning of the change in the story that led me to helping women discover the words that they didn't know they had. But I had to be ready. I had to be ready to say, you know what? We're afraid of many things. And one of the things that we're most afraid of is ourselves and our own story. We are afraid of where we went wrong. We're afraid of what part of the situation was due to our own actions. We are afraid of how we contributed to the fallout, to the results. But when we're ready, and when we realize that running from accountability and responsibility means that we're running away from ourselves, then we're in a place to begin to admit, yep, I had something to do with this problem. It might have been only like this much. But knowing that, knowing how I've caused my current situation, my circumstances, now I can begin to have a conversation with myself and my allies, because that's what we need. We need allies, we need angels, we need guides, we need guardians. And Lord knows how this woman came into my life. But there was something in my story that resonated with her, so that she was able to say, you got to do this work and I'll be waiting for you. And I think that is underneath the stories that we're sharing with the listeners here, that there is a lot of, as Amanda said earlier, a crime scene of all kinds of drama going on in the lives. We have to be ready. And you'll know you're ready because you wake up and you say, I ain't living like this anymore. I want to say what I mean, and I want to mean what I say. And when we've reached that point, then we've said yes. That's when our story changes.
Wow. So first of all, can I just acknowledge the greatness of your friend? Wow. And I also want to pick up from what you just said, because that's also when my clients start to change. And what they come to me wanting permission for, because Keith, you asked about permission, is to change the other people in their story, right? My husband, my kid, and especially, let's take the husband example, because then there's no hierarchy. It's two adults who are peers. One of the most important questions I can ask her is, and if the shoe was on the other foot, if he was sitting here and telling you that you have to be more like this and be less like that, and things can only be better if you change, I said, how would you feel? Right? Usually the answer is, I'd rip his head off, right? Just, you can't talk to me like that. You can't expect that from me. Like, who are you? I say, okay, how is this any different? You can't come in here and tell me, let's rewrite somebody else's story. You don't get to do that. You don't have permission to do that. You can only change your story. And that is a big fear. That is a moment of crisis, because she comes in thinking that she's 100% right and has zero responsibility, and he's 100% wrong and has all the responsibility. And so if we can just fix him, then everything will be fine. Right? And I tell her that, first of all, I'm not the ref at a soccer game. Right? And if you're two people who have been sharing a life, then there isn't any such thing as 0 and 100. And I'm also not interested in assigning percentages. Whatever it is, you're in a relationship with this other person. Let's look at your part, for the simple reason that that's the part that's up to you to change. Now, if you tell me you don't want to change it, okay, there's a Yiddish phrase that says, "Abi gesinnt." Oh, like, go ahead. You should be healthy. Go do whatever you want. It's like a polite way of saying, go soak your head. Right? Like, if you don't want to change, okay, no one's going to make you change if you don't want to change. But like you said, when things are hard enough, when you're unhappy enough, because it doesn't usually come from a good place. It comes from a place where, like you said, I am stuck in the valley of death. And if I can either stay here and die, or I can get moving, right? And what I can't do is make anybody else drag me out. Only I can do that. So I can stay in my the terrible isolation of my story that says, oh, I'm only like this because he, which, even if it was true, isn't ever going to help. Or I can say, I want to change. Now, that change could be, I don't want to be in a relationship with this person anymore. That's one avenue. But most of the women who come to me do want to stay in the relationship. And I need to help them understand if they're willing to do what it takes, which is to say, I'm here to change me and figure out how I can get closer to that other person, not how I can make them come to my side of the tracks. If we want to be on the same side of the tracks, good, I can cross to his side. There's nothing stopping me. And that's usually where the most meaningful work happens. Once she's willing to do it, once she decides that it's worth it for her to do it, not because I said so, because she wants to,
Yeah.
the how is not the hard part. It's deciding that I'm willing to take that leap from insisting that the other person needs to, that I'm going to drag them to where I am, or if I'm willing to make a step towards them. And that's the biggest transformation. After that, actually writing the next part of the story is not the hard part.
They say that one of the bravest words we can use is often help. And I hear that in your story, Malka, and it relates back to the courage in Eileen's 3 C's.
Oh, Amanda, any words to this?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about agency and how to see your way forward, for me, and this is not a plug, there is no better way to see your story and to find the places where you actually do have agency than to write it. There's something about the writing process that is so much more honest than the speaking process. I can talk circles around myself to a therapist, to a friend, to a guide, but I cannot tell myself a lie when I write. And there's this magical thing that happens when people get about, I want to say it happens at like the 50 to 60% mark. I can almost predict it. They will contact me and say, you know how when I started writing the book, this crazy thing started to happen in the background, like with my husband or my finances or my health or whatever, however it came up for them. They were going to work on their story. This other thing started happening. Yes, yes, yes. Well, have you noticed that every time I have a situation like this in my story in the first 3 chapters, I respond to it like this? Yes, I've noticed that. Okay, I need a better response. This one is getting me into trouble every single time. Yes, it is. And then it's a matter of experimentation, right? Like now we're 60% of the way through the story, and you've met that moment where you have to now, for the rest of it, be honest about, yes, I continue to do this. But now you have the eyes to look at your own story. And if you have the eyes to look at other stories like the great epics, you can start to see that there are some pretty solid blueprints in the good stories that are the scripts. I mean, I have literally lifted automatically. I have lifted scripts out of movies and television shows to insert into my relationships because everything else that I have written doesn't work. So I'm going to try this one. And you know what? It like got me almost there. So writing is one of the most powerful ways to leverage story because you will see things that you will not tell yourself.
Eileen? Only because it's in
Oh,
your eyes. Other than that, we need to move into 2 different a linear path, but 2 more points need to be made. But I see something in your eyes.
oh, I was just going to say that the universe works in mysterious ways, and when we allow that mystery to become a part of the process, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think all of us can attest to that for the work that we do. And when we see that shift, that change in our client, even if it's before they see it, we can say, yes, they got it. But it's a collaboration, cooperation, between the self, the universe, and whatever is bigger than us. And I think letting go of the control and letting go allows a transformation to occur faster. Yeah.
Cool. This is what I want to do for the time that we have remaining. And so I want to give each of you about 5 minutes to hit on a point that hasn't been made by you at this point in the conversation. So I want to give you an opportunity to, hit a home run here. And then once we do that, I want each of you to leave our audience with a to-do, something that they can do today, and not contact me because I'm the greatest in what I do. They could do that on their own time. You're going to give them something that they could think about, something they could put into practice, something they could try, whatever that is, something simple, but something that allows them to be empowered, push through their courage, and start writing a new chapter in whatever life they're living. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Malka, I want to start with you. Something that you haven't addressed yet,
Okay.
but that needs to be addressed by you.
Okay.
Go for it.
A big part of the work of creating a happy marriage is the work of stitching two different equally valid stories together into a story that's going to become our story. Not my story, his story, our story. But that happens slowly. It doesn't happen right away. And the foundation of it is acknowledging that this is not about right or wrong, fair, unfair. We have equally valid stories. I'm a person, I have a certain perspective, I have a certain background, I have a certain experience. He does too. And if I can sit in the kind of beautiful curiosity that Amanda has described, where I say, oh, can you tell me what that was like for you? Or how did that feel? Or what were you thinking? Or, but in a way that I'm not telling him who to be, but trying to learn who he is, that will help us to have better understanding and to move forward together instead of each trying to pull the other person into their own story. So I think that's something really fundamental, and a good way to get practical about doing that is to acknowledge the fact that our minds are always and easily attracted to what's wrong. It's just how we are. There's not anything wrong with you if you're doing that. Everybody does that, right? What did Diane say? Like, it's not just you, it's everybody. But what you can do is add awareness and add intention to seeking out the good things in your partner. Like Amanda said, and write them down, okay? Not to share them, just to help them become more real to you, to help them become more a part of how you see things. It doesn't mean that the other things aren't real. It doesn't mean you want to address them. But the more attention you learn to pay to what you do like, to what is good, to what is beautiful, to what is admirable, you'll have a much more healthy, balanced perspective if and when you choose to address the other things. One last point that I would make is that it's not about what you say. It's about what you feel inside when you say it. People pick up on all kinds of things that we don't just say. And when you talk about a story, you think it's words or creating a certain scene, but there's a lot of unspoken communication that goes on between two human beings, right? I mean, we're part of the animal kingdom. We also communicate in a lot of non-verbal ways. It's language isn't just words that I speak. There's many, many other aspects to language. And so it's really important to pay attention to what I really think and feel about this other person on a regular basis and try to create the inside language, the language that's inside me, because the other person is going to pick up on that, and because the best way to attract good energy, to attract respect, love, affection, support, is by giving it, is by creating the energy in the relationship that I want to feel, that I want there to be. You know, I mean, I suppose you could sum it up in a quote card, you know, be the change, right? But the way to actually do that would be to consciously and intentionally pay attention to what is good and really do that every day. Call it a gratitude practice, call it a marriage practice, call it whatever you want, just do it. Right? And that will change how you think and feel about the other person, and they will definitely feel that. And it can only do good things.
Thank you.
I would like to add something kind of fun to that as part of my next, like, this piece is that paying attention part, and kind of where I started with being at the beginning of where story mattered for me. Then it helped me to see things and articulate things. And oftentimes, like, just for ourselves, it's hard to know what's happening under here, let alone now we're in relationship trying to understand why we feel this way about this human being, let alone try to understand. So again, story can create that bridge. Last year, I was having this, like, I was waking up with these thoughts that just did not make sense. Like, where's the meaning? Where's the purpose? Like, it didn't make sense when you looked at my life. And I would try to say these things to my husband in passing, and it just, you know, because he's watching me in this career where I get to, like, help people rewrite their stories, and there's all these beautiful things happening. And but there was something down deep. And so we were watching a show together, and there were 2 episodes that were awful that I kept repeating, like repeatedly watching by myself. And so my tip here is to pay attention to what you're obsessing about, especially if it's a story externally. So whatever you're binge watching, whatever you're thinking about getting back to at the end of the day, like, there's usually some medicine in there, and we obsess about it because there's something there for us. And so I was watching this, and I would watch it like late at night. It was 2 of the worst episodes ever. And so I decided to come clean one day because I couldn't get it on my own. And who better than the person who knows me better, for better or worse, than this human? So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And I confess, like, I've been doing this. Can you help me figure out why? Because you know me, see me, watch me every day better than anyone else. Can you? And he, like, he settled in with me in this story conversation, and he's like, well, shoot, do you think it could be this? No. Is it this character? No. Like, he played with me in the story realm, like he's watching me do with other people. And we couldn't get there. And I stupidly started this 20 minutes before I had a coaching session. Stupidly. 3 minutes before my coaching session, he says, well, I think the only other thing that, and it makes no sense with you, is that after this happened to him, there was a question of meaning and purpose. Like, why would he go on after this happens to him, this thing that you've been watching on repeat every night? And I just broke, like, just visceral shatter. That was it. My body was like, oh my gosh, that's what this is. This is about meaning and purpose. It doesn't make any sense with the rest of my life. And then when he saw my reaction, he was like, are you kidding me? The person who's paying the most careful attention to me couldn't get there, because I couldn't get there. But story gave us that way to talk about it without talking about it, because the real it didn't make any sense. But the feelings lodged in that other story gave us access to this thing, and immediately connected us in a deeper way than any sort of, like, sitting down trying to sort any of that out would have worked. So pay attention to what you're obsessed with and make confessions when it's safe.
Yeah.
This is what I'm obsessed with. What do you think that might be about? be gentle.
Fantastic. Eileen, Diane?
Okay. Unless you want to, Diane.
No, go ahead, Eileen.
All right. So I was trying to think of what I have not brought up, and I'm going to bring dis-ease into this conversation because our thinking, our emotions have an impact on our body. And my experience was way back when before fibromyalgia became a household name, I was diagnosed with it. And it wasn't until I changed my story, I changed my thinking, and I stopped identifying with, I have fibromyalgia, did my life change. It wasn't until I removed, I have this, and instead I shifted to a different protocol. I'm happy, I'm healthy, I am whatever I wanted to become. And literally in 3 months, I did other things as well physically to heal the body and basically balance my body, mind, and spirit because I was totally broken on all levels. When I totally shifted my thinking, my belief system, and my story to seeing myself already where I wanted to be, in 3 months, all my symptoms went away and never came back. So I self-healed from that debilitating dis-ease in my body that was brought on by the negative thinking, not telling my story, not speaking up, having a closed vocal cord, not feeling empowered, and the list can go on. And so I think it's very key for women, especially, to recognize if you have dis-ease in the body, whatever it is, there could be something attached to it of your story you're telling yourself, or how you're showing up in the world. I am whatever this is. And again, as I said earlier, to shift the word from whatever the negative intonation of that word is to a positive word. So it's real. The shift is real. But again, it's got to be in the heart center, in the belief system, in your core, that you want that change and you want to be different in the world and become more of yourself. So through that process, I was also wanting to find myself again because I had lost Eileen, the Eileen that was born, to who she was. And so I had to totally revamp my whole life, my whole being, and how I was showing up in the world. And so my process from that point forward over the last 20, 25 years has been to strengthen my boundaries, to strengthen my vocal cords, to give myself permission to speak up and to develop those 3 C's: confidence, courage, and clarity. And when you have that empowerment, and when you feel that that past isn't dragging you down and dragging you back, then you have the strength and the ability to say yes to what is important to you and say yes to what is going to work for you. So I look at everything in my life as, is this working for me or is this not working for me? And sometimes I give something a little bit longer than probably I should, just to see if I can shift it. And if I can't, I have to give myself permission to let it go. And it's not always easy, but once I let it go, another world opens up that brings in something new that works for me. And it's just magical. Again, there's magic that can happen in the world and in our individual world when we understand everything that all of us have talked about today, and that we do have the power to direct our life, but pay attention to what's trying to block it, stop it, hold us back, keep us stuck. And as Diane found out, it took someone outside of her to say, you can do this. And
Mm.
by golly, you're going to do it. And basically she wasn't given a choice, right? So she was ready to say yes. And I think you did say, Diane, that you were ready.
I was
And
ready.
when we're ready, the universe brings us what is going to guide
Exactly.
us.
Mhm.
And to be aware of that is also key. So I'm going to leave the audience with this exercise to practice, to help that awareness strengthen, and to allow that guidance to come through in order to know the steps and the actions to take. And that is what I call the quiet the mind exercise. And basically, you close your eyes, and even if you have a full mind and crazy busy, give yourself long enough to clear that out. And you imagine a blue sky, some fluffy clouds, a hawk in the distance, and you just sit with that energy till it infuses in you. And you feel that sense of calm and peace come over you. And when you feel that, you open your eyes and you ask yourself, what's the first word that comes to mind? And then that's the word that you want to focus on. And a lot of times it's peace, it's calm, serenity. It could be something totally different. But whatever that word is, that's your inner compass telling you what you need to focus on to take that next step for healing, transformation, and to become that better version of yourself so that your life is going in a direction that you want it to go. And that's my
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I will refer to something Keith said earlier about metaphor. And there is a great ocean of spiritual journeying taking place in this conversation because story is part of our spiritual journeying. And I believe that long ago and far away, we signed a cosmic contract. And in that cosmic contract, we agreed that if we were to come to Earth, we had a specific task to do that gave purpose and meaning, as Amanda said earlier, to our lives. And somewhere along the way, we might have forgotten it, or maybe it got misplaced. Maybe we've lost touch with the who we are. Maybe we are ready to give up because we've never had our hands around whatever that thing is that brings us to full and flourishing life. And here on Whidbey Island, we have a poet by the name of David White. He's also called the Bard of the Boardroom. I've been following him for generations since he was in short pants. And one of his poems is one of my favorites. He calls it the Well of Grief. And he says that those who are lucky enough to dive under those dark waters and go down into the well of grief will find the glittering coins tossed by those who wished for something else. And I believe that what he is saying to us is that there is a way to restore ourselves to our cosmic contract, and that is to find those glittering coins of our story. And the way in which we do that is to revisit our who. In this digital age, everyone's talking about our why. And Simon Sinek is right. Our why is important, but our who precedes our why. Our who gives expression to the work that we do. What's it for? Who's it for? Why does it matter? Our who shows us the way through relationships. It gives our lives purpose and meaning. So the better we know our who, the better able we are to work on our why, which helps others be seen and heard and understood and listened to. We can transform the lives of those we serve by being aware of, discovering, taking action on, sharing our story. And I think one of the best ways we can go about discovering our who or revisiting our who is to do an archaeological dig on ourselves. We're going back to those early days when we were 7 or 8 or 9, and we're looking at that past civilization. We're looking at that little spiritual person who came here in the guise of a human being and saying, what did you like? What were you about? What did you dream of? What was important to you? How did you play? And if there were troubles, how did you overcome them? How did your resilience and your courage and your competence show up at an early age? They say that by the time we're 7, our values are formed. Did I have adventure and justice and self-expression back when I was 7? Yes. I might have been an incest survivor, but I was figuring out early on how to have a voice, and that carries over to today. So, who are you? Dust off the sand of that past civilization and see the artifacts that show up. And once we get in touch with our who, then we go, oh, so that's my why. So those are my values. So that's the contract that I signed. Who knew? What are the chances? Well, the chances are because when we're ready and we start to invite those questions, then, as Eileen said, the help comes to us from places we could not have imagined. So what I want to leave with is animals leave tracks. Humans leave stories. And I want to use that in 2 ways. If there is a door to close on a story that you've been telling yourself, perhaps now is the time to close that door. And if you want to leave a story, a legacy, something about your who, perhaps now is the time to begin to craft it. And whether you like to take sidewalk chalks out on a big stretch of concrete driveway like I do, the kids in my neighborhood think I'm absolutely nuts. Draw it, sketch it out, get a great big piece of paper and crayons, get down on the floor and draw your story. If you're a writer, write your story out in words. And if you're a talker like me, walk around the block and talk your story out. However it is that you do it, embrace your story as the who that you are. Because that's the cosmic contract that you signed to come here and to be your full human self.
The only thing I could
Thank
say
you.
to this conversation is to thank you all for being here. So I'm going to leave with a thank you. And then for those of you who are watching and listening, thank you too. And I'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.